use your news outlet in your name. Okay, first question I can see here is from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. And your question is, can you comment on the 109 aid organizations calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, citing starvation without mentioning the hostages? And also, a second question, which I'll get to in a moment. Okay, your first question, Joel, was about the aid organizations calling for a ceasefire, citing starvation without mentioning the hostages. Thank you for your question, Joel. Look, when it comes to hunger in Gaza, firstly, there's a couple of points to make here. This idea of famine and starvation has been thrown at us consistently on a weekly basis for the last 2 years now. It has never come to pass. So these are false warnings which come from these aid organizations. And I also would say that where there is hunger in Gaza, it is hunger orchestrated by Hamas. This is very clearly their tactic, and it is working, because Hamas seeks to put international pressure, which unfortunately too many international countries are too willing to follow suit on, to put pressure on Israel to support their negotiating tactics, stopping them initiating or agreeing to a hostage release pause. So this pressure, which is coming, talking about starvation and famine, this is simply playing into Hamas's hands. Where there is hunger, it is hunger orchestrated by Hamas. It is hunger created by the terrorist organization, which means that it is even more important that of course, our hostages are released, but also that Hamas is no longer in control in Gaza to free the people of Gaza from the appalling treatment which they are receiving. They are starving their own people. Hamas are restricting food from their own people. And media, and I think this is true across too many outlets, are not reporting. They're reporting up to a point that there are problems of hunger in Gaza, but there are problems caused by Hamas. That final part of that sentence doesn't seem to have made it through. Okay, next question from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. Is Israel experiencing a crisis in relations with Christian communities over the church in Gaza, settler violence, visas for evangelicals? Okay, well, thank you for that question, Joel. Look, Israel's relations with Christian communities is extremely important, extremely important in this country. I myself sat on a round table inside Washington, D.C. In February, where the Prime Minister met leaders of the evangelical community. They are an extremely important ally to Israel. We take them extremely seriously. We are, of course, Christianity is a younger brother of Judaism in a certain sense, and we take that relationship extremely seriously. There is no crisis. Where there is a crisis is that the pro-Hamas movement are trying to engineer a crisis. This is purely an engineered crisis. We take our relationship with the Christian community extremely seriously. Israel is the only country where the number of Christians are increasing. It's the only country in hundreds of miles in any direction where Christians are free to practice their faith freely without restrictions. Of course, where there are issues on an individual basis, then they are condemned, and they are and they should be. And more can always be done in that sense. But this country takes our relationship with the Christian community extremely importantly, and that will continue to be the case under this government. And finally, you got a question there. Just one more. Just go up there. You asking for comment on Ozzy Osbourne, who supported Israel. We, of course, from the State of Israel, send our condolences to the family of Ozzy Osbourne, who passed away recently. Next question, please. It's Jodie Cohen at Newsmax. What more can you tell us about the conversations between Steve Witkoff and Israeli officials regarding ceasefire and hostage release negotiations? Is more pressure being placed on Hamas to agree to a deal, and what will be the next steps if Hamas doesn't agree? Thank you for that question, Jodie. Look, the Hamas terrorist organization continues to cling to its refusal. And the latest information I can give you that Israel at this moment is still awaiting an official response via the mediators of Hamas. But to this point, I can share with you that Hamas have continued to refuse. They are continuing to refuse the hostage return proposal, which Israel has agreed to. Consistently, Israel has agreed and Hamas have not agreed. Israel has agreed to the Qatari proposal and the updated Witkoff framework. It is Hamas, unfortunately, which persists in its refusal, and they have been setting unacceptable conditions. So the Israeli negotiating team is still in Doha, and these talks are continuing, and they will continue because our objective is to get our hostages home. As you know, in Gaza, there are 50 hostages still remaining, the living and those already murdered, cruelly abducted by the terrorist organization Hamas. Look, it's 656 days now. 656 days of appalling captivity. 20 of our hostages remain alive. That's the latest information we have. We, from our point of view here in Israel, have a moral and ethical obligation to do everything possible, and that is precisely what we are doing, and we will not rest, and the Prime Minister has repeated this again and again and again. We will not rest until every single last one of them are home. The dead for a decent burial, for closure for their families, to be reunited with their families, and for burial in Israel, and the living, so they can begin to rebuild their lives from their appalling ideal. I would just say to you that if the international media and the international community put as much pressure on Hamas to release our hostages than it has done over the last few days of this false claim of famine in Gaza, this false claim of famine, where the famine, hunger which has been orchestrated by the terrorist organization, then our hostages would have been home a long time ago. So our efforts to secure their return continue constantly. We're in coordination with the US. The Prime Minister is in personal contact with the President, President Trump, as well as with Steve Witkoff. And look, since the October 7th terror attack, we've managed to get back 205 people from Gaza. That's no mean feat. Our experts were saying that none of them would come home alive. 148 of them have come home alive. 57, unfortunately, came back deceased. And we are extremely grateful to President Trump and Mr. Witkoff for their steadfast support in our tireless effort to get our people home. They must be set free now, not tomorrow, not for another moment. Right now, our people must be set free right now. Okay, next question from Yotam Confino from the Daily Telegraph in the UK.